I know of no town, no city that has been besieged for 18 years that still lives with the vitality and the force and the hope and the determination of the city of West Berlin. Today, in the world of freedom, the proudest boast is, Ich bin ein Berliner.
Indeed. June 26, 1963, 22 months after Soviets supported East Germany, and they put up, basically just blew everything up, put up the Berlin Wall, separated a city and a nation. President John Kennedy made a memorable speech that is marked today as an historic moment in the Cold War. So let's bring it forward to our day and time now. Welcoming the coordinator and professor of American Studies at Lynn University in Boca Raton, Florida, Dr. Robert Watson joins us in the studio today. Dr. Watson, thank you very much for being here.
My pleasure.
Ich bin ein Berliner. We are all Berliners, brother.
We are all Berliners. Yes. Great speech, one of the greatest of the 20th century. And that line was fantastic, and he preceded that line with another great line. He said, 2,000 years ago, the proudest boast was civis Romanus sum. I am a Roman citizen. And then he forwarded it to the present time, Ich bin ein Berliner, with that Massachusetts accent, forgetting the R's in Berliner.
It's perfect.
But, yeah. And 450,000 people was estimated were there, which is unthinkable, that size. They went wild. You could, the excitement in the air. And Kennedy had, it was his fourth day in Germany. He visited Bonn, he visited Cologne, a couple other cities, and the crowds were huge, the excitement was there, so they were prepared for a big day, but even he and some of his top aides were shocked at the warm response and the enthusiasm from the crowd that day.
Is it fair to say that, because that came in, I mean, a major point of the Cold War, that this brought the two nations together? Certainly we're talking about the 60s, we're still talking about World War II was still in the minds of so many people. It's not as if it happened a long time ago, it was 15 years maybe, and this was a true unifying moment that still speaks to the German relations with America today.
Absolutely, we need to put this in context. This is 2 years after the Cuban Missile, a year after the Cuban Missile Crisis, 2 years after the Bay of Pigs. So we're at the height of the Cold War. Kennedy, of course, botches the Bay of Pigs, but handles the Cuban Missile Crisis brilliantly. The speech essentially had three audiences. Number one was the Russians, the Soviets. We're here. We're not going to back off from our allies. We're going to stick with West Germany. The second audience was the world in the larger Cold War. The world was picking sides in this global chess game. We wanted to remind the world that we're not going to shirk our responsibilities. The third audience were the Berliners themselves, that who just in 1961, that's when the wall was started, a 100-mile long, 12-foot high wall throughout the city. And then the Berliners remembered back in '48 with the Berlin airlift, when the Soviets blockaded all of Western Berlin. They weren't going to allow any rail, any water, any traffic into the city. And Harry Truman then provided the airlift for month after month after month, where we flew tons of everything from coal to toilet paper to chocolate from the candy bomber. And we flew it in for the people of Berlin. So it was a sensitive point in history. And Kennedy's appearance there really helped the Berliners to deal with that, with the reality of the wall that they saw every day.
What then was the, let's say, the short term of that within 5, 10 years, or even just 5, 10 months, if you will, going in and saying this, the general feel that it gave the Germans and the push that it gave them then at that difficult time, and how big was that moving forward?
I think there's three moments that you could point to. One is Harry Truman and the Marshall Plan, rebuilding Germany, forgiving Germany, and bringing Germany in as an ally within a few years after Hitler's reign. The third moment would be Ronald Reagan, of course, tear down that wall, and just putting an exclamation point behind this relationship. But sandwiched between those two bookends was this speech, and you saw a real warming of U.S.-German relations here. You saw this as a major victory in the Cold War. Trade between the two countries, alliances between the two countries are solidified, and this speech has a lot to do with that.
You mentioned the Soviets too, because I think that's fair to say. We always think about he went there and he said this for the Germans and brought the German people together. But was this not that stick in the eye to the Soviets in many ways? Absolutely.
Well, you know, the Soviets were, they basically lost the showdown in 1948 with the Berlin airlift. They thought that complete blockade would weaken us. Truman said, we will fly planes in every hour for years if need be. And after month after month after month, the Soviets backed down. You could say that they blinked first in this duel that we were having, this game of chicken. But with the wall going up, the Soviets then thought they had a firm advantage. Because the deal is, of course, all of Germany is divided behind what Winston Churchill called the Iron Curtain. But Berlin was deep in the communist sector. So it wasn't that it was in the west, it was deep in the eastern sector. And with the wall there, the Soviets thought they had the advantage. Kennedy's speech, the enthusiasm from the crowd, really put an exclamation point after that. And the other thing that he wisely brought up was there was an exodus from East Germany. People were fleeing East Germany to get to the west before they built the wall, which was a great public relations victory for us. You know, when you have freedom on one side and communism on the other side, everyone is doing everything they can, risking their lives to get across the wall. He discussed that. And there's one more line later in the speech that was almost as good, but probably more powerful from a global political perspective. There were folks that said we should appease the Soviets. They built the wall, let's not antagonize them, let's try to work with them. Kennedy said no. He said, if that's the case, come to Berlin and come and see what they're doing and then see what we're doing on the West. So that was a strong line. In fact, so strong that when Kennedy gave his next speech, a little later after giving that, his advisors had him water down his remarks just a smidge because they thought it was a wee bit too muscular. But I think history has borne it out that it was the right thing to do at the right time.
I have less than a minute left. We could not get away with this by saying that I am still to this day ribbed by many people who will tell me that he either said we are all Berliners or we are all a jelly donut.
The answer's both. Yeah.
It depends on which part of Germany you're from, correct?
Right, that's right. You could say, ich bin Berliner. And then it's clear that he was a Berliner. But ich bin ein Berliner, maybe he was the pastry that the German people like so much, a Berliner. And there was a lot of discussion of it afterward, but either way, whether we're a jelly donut or we're a Berliner, people got the gist. And quite frankly, Kennedy's charisma, he could have got up there and said, "Meu mama dog face to the banana patch." And people would have said, "I'm with you, I'm right with you."
Well, he was that popular in America, too. He could basically say whatever he wanted at that point.
You know, not only were the words beautiful, but he had a sense of delivery. And I think the same with Reagan with the tear down this wall. These guys had a sense of timing. They had a sense of delivery. They could read the phone book and people would have nodded their heads. But a great moment in history.
But remember, too, we are still all Berliners, and I'm keeping that. I'm not rolling on the jelly donut.
I know you're not.
Dr. Watson, thank you so much for joining us. Those of you who even saw this speech and were there, tell us a little bit about it and the time in the Cold War, because certainly Kennedy helped to turn the tables with that speech. And, of course, remembering once again that, at least for today, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, you are all Berliners. And I'm not even hungry at this point. Tell us what you think about it on social media. We'll talk about it here because every day on Midpoint we question everything.